Hey everybody, in this video I'll show you how we can handle the invalid date ranges. So I have this sample data and I want to filter it based on the start and end date. So let's take a start date to the all the way start of the month and then make a selection somewhere 10 of this month. So now our data is filtered. Now the problem happens when we set the start date in the past. Let's make it invalid. So I'll make the start date, move it to today. So now we can see that it's an invalid because the start date cannot be set in the future and the end date is in the past. So it's an invalid selection, hence we see this message. If I correct it, if I move the start date, end date, past, in the future, now we get one result, which is 17. So normally Ionic does not come with such functionality to tell us to check whether the start date is within range or not. So I'll be using this date-fns library to achieve this solution. While looking at the problem, I've realized that we have a quick solution as well. What we can do, we can use the Ionic Datetime min property. As it says, the minimum date time allowed. If I go back and if I select the start date in the somewhere 10th of January, what it does, it automatically sets the minimum property equal to that of the start date. So the end date should always start from the 10th of January. Now we cannot go before that. The end date should always be in the future, and now we don't have that issue anymore. So voila, we have solved our problem. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use the stack blades. It really make the development faster. You don't really need to care about the environments and installing all the npm dependencies, although you can use the choice of editor and environment. So for this purpose, I'm just click on Ionic. This will quickly bootstrap an app for me. Let's have a live preview here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the home and get rid of all this content. So we will see a blank page. We have nothing to display. No worries. I will bring in all the template we need. So we need two Ion-Datetimes components that have a start date and end date. We do need their variables, and we'll go to that when we go to the coding file, to the TS file. Then we do have a kind of a separator, which is just an h2 tag, and then we have a way to list all the data. So now we have all that. Let's move to the code. So next up, what I need is I need to bring in some properties like start date, end date for binding, and then invalid selection. It's a boolean that shows an error message. Next up, we have some basic data, and then I also need a clone of data that's assigned to another variable, filter. I will tell you in a moment why I need this property. Next up, I need to load a function whenever we change we need to make a selection. I need accept an event which says an ion change. So what we can do is to execute a load result method whenever a date is changed. So what we can do, I think we have error here. Okay, our app is back live with the static data without any logic. So all all I need to do is I need to have this function. Next up, I do have a little bit of validation. If the start date, if no date is, if any of this date is empty, I will just return a function, because for both of the start date and end date we are executing the same function, so that's why I need this logic. Next up, what I need to do is to filter the data. So, but this function also complains about these two methods. What are they? These are just, we're right now we are getting the data in a string format, but we need to convert into proper date. That's what this function requires. Where this function comes, this comes from a date fns library that we have discussed already. And I think normally if you don't have this package, you will get some kind of a button to install the plugin, and it does everything for you. You don't need to go to the npm or thing like that. It automatically picks the name of the package and install it. So next up, we need to see which what this function does. So all it does, its description says, is the given date within range? So the first one value is the given date, and it checks between, in our case, the start date and end date. So this is the date in question, whether it lies between the start date and end date. So if this is returned true, then this is eventually added to the filter array, and our list is updated based on the selection. So let's try it out. Let's go to the all the way here and then do this day. So our data is filtered based on the selection. Let's make a invalid selection. So my end date should be before the 15. So now we can see the error. The start of the range cannot be after the end of range. This error is thrown by this function, is within range. So let's see what we can do to solve this problem. So as I've discussed, the quick solution is to use the min property. So what I can do is that whatever the start date is changed, I want to change the min property to that of the start date. I mean, now the min of the end date is binded with the start date value. So what will happen if I select the start date as 13? I cannot go beyond the 13, before 13. It can go, the end date should always be in the future, so I cannot generate that error. I do get proper result. So we have solved this problem. You can go with this solution and stop the video right here. But if you really want to go ahead and give the user feedback, much better visual feedback, that you need make an invalid selection rather than locking the end date. So then continue the video. So let's extend this, take this example further. What we can do is next up we need to add another logic that I'll explain with this code snippet. What it does, we are checking if the end date comes before the start date, then we are showing a toast with this message, and we then empty out the filter data, and then we set the invalid selection to true. So let's toast control complain. Let's import the toast controller from Ionic. And let's make an invalid selection, but for this purpose we do need to remove the min property, and I think that's it. If I select a start date somewhere 20 and move the end date so it's not locked, so I can go before the start date. What we see, note start date cannot be set in the future. If I make a proper selection, leave it here on 20 and move the start date and date to the 20 and start date to the start of the month, I do get the result, but I need to remove the invalid selection function. If I don't need this error then. So that's it. That's the end of this tutorial. I hope you have learned a thing or two. Thank you for watching.